The Broken Blade, Chapter 6, First Light. In the back of his mind, Pierre heard a low growling, then the sound of claws digging into tree bark. I must be dreaming, he thought, pulling his blanket tighter around his shoulders. His head ached even worse than it had the night before. He was just drifting back to sleep when a second growl came. A bear. Pierre's eyes flashed open. Crouched at the base of a pine was Andre Bellegarde, scratching the bark with his bear claw necklace. Ha ha! Beloit cackled from behind. He trotted to Pierre's side and leaned directly over his face. Portage time, he croaked, his black eyes glittering. Say goodbye to your pretty dreams. Beloit's breath smelled of stale liquor, and his mutilated nose was even uglier than Pierre remembered it. Go away, Pierre said, but Beloit and Belgrade picked up the canoe that had been Pierre's shelter for the night. Pierre blinked as bits of leaves and sand fell into his face. While the men carried the canoe away, Pierre focused his sleep-swollen eyes. It was still dark, but the canoes were all gone. The few men who remained in camp were picking up parcels from the pile at the end of the beach and starting up the trail. Pierre scrambled to his feet. He stuffed his blanket into his pack and hurried over to help with the work. His muscles were sore, and his right hand was raw and aching. It's time to work, Graybeard, Beloit greeted him when he got to the pile of parcels. We're ready to leave you for bear bait. Mr. McKay said, Good afternoon, lad. I hope you weren't waiting for us to bring you breakfast in bed. Pierre's cheeks were hot. His head pounded. His lips felt dry and cracked, and his mouth tasted as if it were filled with sawdust. Beloit helped Lalande hoist his double packs in place. Lalande paused a moment to adjust his tump line and wink at Pierre. He patted the boy on the shoulder and grinned. It's an easy carry, son, he said, trotting off with his usual springy stride. I think we start you with one pack today. Beloit reached for a parcel. His hair was still plastered with bits of sand and leaves from sleeping on the ground. Pierre tried not to look at his face. No, give me the same as everyone, Pierre insisted, anxious to get away from Beloit as fast as he could. Whatever you say. Beloit heaved the first pack onto his back. The straps cut into Pierre's shoulders and jerked him backward. He wheeled his arms to keep from falling. Beloit grinned. Ready for another? Pierre gasped as he tottered to maintain his balance. I'll come back for the other one. As you wish, Beloit snickered, taking 2 packs for himself as Pierre started up the path. The trail was rugged. As Pierre stepped from one rock to the next, he tried not to imagine how embarrassing it would be to trip while carrying only a single pack. Before he was halfway up the ridge, La Petite passed him, stepping out into the bushes and back onto the trail without breaking stride. 3 bundles were stacked on his back. Pierre multiplied 3 times 90 in his mind and couldn't believe La Petite carried that much weight without even slowing down. Beloit and another man, both portaging double packs, passed Pierre before he reached the crown of the spruce-covered hill. The straps cut into his shirt as if they were sharp metal bands, and there was no way to relieve the pain. If he leaned back, his neck muscles burned and his body pitched forward. If he hooked his thumbs under the straps to relieve the weight, his blisters grated against the canvas. Thankful for his strong legs, Pierre barely felt the load on his lower body until he was well over the rise. But he worked his way down the backside of the ridge. He suddenly wondered if he would make it. The muscles in his legs popped out with each step, and his calves burned. Knowing he was the last one on the trail, he thought for a moment about tossing his pack into the brush. He could hike home in a day and be done with the pain for good. When Pierre noticed a mossy patch of ground ahead, he decided to rest a minute. But just then he saw a bright patch of blue through the underbrush. Water! He held his pace, knowing that if the path turned rough again, he would never make it. The trail took a sharp turn to the left and suddenly got steeper. Pierre groaned, but there was no stopping now. Partway down the hill, he looked up. The entire crew stood at attention to blow, facing him. Pierre heard taunts and jeers inside his head, yet the men just stared, strangely silent. As Pierre leaned into the tump line, he saw La Petite whisper something to Lalande. Both men grinned. I'll show them, he silently vowed, Throwing caution aside, he doubled his pace, risking a headlong tumble. His legs gave out as he reached the shore. La Petite caught him under the arms as the weight of Pierre's pack twisted his body around and jerked him backward. His feet flew up, and he nearly rolled into the river. Suddenly the men cheered. La Petite helped Pierre out of his pack straps and onto his feet. Several men stepped forward and clapped him on the back. He was confused even more when Charbonneau stepped forward and shook his hand, saying, "Fine carry, son." "Good job, lad." McKay tipped his hat. "You showed 'em," Lalande said, and Emile, who had thrown his cap in the air, patted Pierre on the shoulder. Pierre's head throbbed, and he was confused by all the attention. It wasn't until Pierre saw Beloit toss a coin to La Petite that he finally figured things out. Pierre knelt to examine his pack. He lifted the flap, and a handful of musket balls rolled out. Someone had stuffed his pack with bags of lead shot. He wondered how many had bet against his making it. Pierre took one of the heavy balls in his hand and stood up. His knuckles went white as he squeezed the bullet in his palm. How stupid could he be? "A lucky carry," Beloit said, spitting into the rocks at Pierre's feet as he stepped toward the waiting canoes. "A man-sized portage would have flattened him." "I told them you'd make it," La Petite said, "but they refused to believe. Their doubt has cost them dearly." He paused and rattled the newly won coins in his palm. "If that pack weighed an ounce, it weighed 200 pounds. The musket ball dropped from Pierre's hand onto the black rocks. "You mean it weighs as much as a double pack?" "Without a doubt, my young voyager." "Young, I'll believe." Beloit snarled as he turned to climb in his canoe. "As for voyager, we shall see." But Pierre was looking at his pack, amazed at what he'd done. La Petite gave Pierre one more clap on the back and waded out of his canoe. The big man collected on a few more wagers after he had taken his place in the stern. He turned toward Pierre one last time, raising his leather coin pouch high and jingling it by the drawstrings. "See me at the next portage, Pierre," he called. "I give you a share of the winnings." "I've got a little something for you, too," Lalande said, waving his paddle at Pierre. "We pick our ponies pretty well, eh, partner?" he bragged to the men in the other canoes. "If we get much luckier, we'll have to give up our voyaging and open a bank." Despite the chorus of boos from middlemen who'd lost money in the betting, Charbonneau's canoe was under way a moment later. As they started upriver, Lalande took up an old French folk song. "Behold the fair Françoise, behold the fair Françoise. She would wed if she may, Malouron Lurette. She would wed if she may, Malouron Lurette. Her love comes late a calling, her love comes." At the chorus, Pierre joined in, pulling as hard on his paddle as his blisters would allow. He was glad to have his first portage behind him, but he was uneasy about the carries that lay ahead.